All right, so let's go ahead and read through chapter 6 all together. Everything is video recording. You can see it's a little bit closer up today than it has been in the past. So, chapter 6, Baskerville Hall. One of the main reasons why I chose chapter 6 to break down again for you is because we have a massive scene change. Now, in the rest of the chapters, and even in the short stories, most of this story takes place in an apartment, with a slight little detour at the end of chapter 5 while he runs through the city. But that is it. So, chapter 6 is a massive scene change where we're going to have Watson going off by himself without Sherlock Holmes. So, it's a very different time for him. And he's going to be on his own, trying to make sure that Sir Henry Baskerville is safe throughout his time at Baskerville Hall. So, let's go ahead and read together. Sir Henry Baskerville and Dr. Mortimer were ready upon the appointed day, and we started as arranged for Devonshire. Mr. Sherlock Holmes drove with me to the station and gave me his last parting injunctions and advice. I will not bias your mind by suggesting theories or suspicions, Watson, said he. I wish you simply to report facts in the fullest possible manner to me, and you can leave me to do the theorizing. What sort of facts? I asked. Anything which may seem to have a bearing, however indirect, upon the case, and especially the relations between young Baskerville and his neighbors, or any fresh particulars concerning the death of Sir Charles. I have made some inquiries myself in the last few days, but the results have, I fear, been negative. One thing only appears to be certain, and that is that Mr. James Desmond, who is the next heir, is an elderly gentleman of a very amiable disposition, so that this persecution does not arise from him. I really think that we may eliminate him entirely from our calculations. There remain the people who will actually surround Sir Henry Baskerville upon the moor. So a couple words here that you more than likely do not know that we have covered before in the past, a couple chapters ago. Amiable. Okay, we've discussed that in chapter 2, actually. Amiable means to have a kind of a very polite, very gentle disposition or way about you. So if you're really comfortable to be around, you have an amiable disposition, a very comfortable attitude to be around. So this is the only heir. Mr. James Desmond who is the next heir, is an elderly gentleman of a very amiable disposition. Is it common for a really old person, say somewhere in their 80s, to be able to kill a young man? Not really. They might be shaking while they try to do that. So we can kind of rule him off as a suspect, is what Holmes is saying, because of his advanced age. Would it not be well in the first place to get rid of this Barrymore couple? Remember the Barrymore couple? Do you all remember who they are? Mm-hmm. Who are they? The servants, right. Okay, those are the servants. The servants. Baskerville. Those are the servants at Baskerville. And notice they also are one of the ones that really stand a lot to gain. They both were awarded 500 pounds, which in today's time would be about $60,000 to $70,000. Once the Sir Charles Baskerville died, so they got a lot from that. Plus, because they're the servants of the hall and no one's living there, they're basically living in this gigantic mansion for free. So Watson thinks, hey, wouldn't it be great if we just go ahead and get rid of them for a little while? By no means. You could not make a greater mistake. If they are innocent, it would be a cruel injustice. And if they are guilty, we should be giving up all chance of bringing it home to them. No. We will preserve them upon our list of suspects. Then there is a groom at the hall, if I remember right. There are 2 moorland farmers. There is our friend Dr. Mortimer, who I believe to be entirely honest. And there is his wife, of whom we know nothing. There is this naturalist, Stapleton, and there is his sister, who is said to be a young lady of attractions. There is Mr. Franklin of Laughter Hall, who is also an unknown factor. And there are 1 or 2 other neighbors. These are the folk who must be your very special study. I will do my best. So, right here we have the list of suspects. The list of suspects, right here. So all of our characters. right there. All the people who could have been the murderer of Sir Charles Baskerville. So we have multiple people who could be in on this, and Watson's job is to go talk to each of these and try to figure out who could have been the cause of this. Who could have been the one, or the one most likely to have killed Sir Charles Baskerville. So these are all of our characters here. You have arms, I suppose. Yes, I thought it well to take them. Most certainly. Keep your revolver near you night and day, and never relax your precautions. Hold up real quick. Why would Dr. Watson have a revolver? Do y'all remember his past? We've talked about it. He was in the war. He was a soldier. He was a doctor in the army. So that's why he has these arms right here, or the revolver. Because he used to be a soldier. That's where he got shot in the arm. And on the cold days, it affects him some. Our friends had already secured a first-class carriage and were waiting for us upon the platform. Now we have no news of any kind, said Dr. Mortimer in answer to my friend's questions. I can swear to one thing, and that is that we have not been shadowed during the last 2 days. We have never gone out without keeping a sharp watch, and no one could have escaped our notice. You have always kept together, I presume. Except yesterday afternoon. I usually give up 1 day to pure amusement when I come to town, so I spent it at the museum of the College of Surgeons. Does that sound interesting to anyone? For a fun day, let's go to the Museum of Surgeons. No, that doesn't seem super fun. But this guy is intellectual. That's all he really does, is he's a pure scientist in many ways. He's a doctor. And I went to look at the folk in the park, said Baskerville. But we had no trouble of any kind. It was imprudent all the same, said Holmes, shaking his head and looking very grave. I beg, Sir Henry, that you will not go about alone. Some great misfortune will befall you if you do. Did you get your other boot? No, sir, it was gone forever. It is gone forever. Remember, that's a reference to the missing boot, because he had, how many boots missing? 2. He had 2, right? One kind of older black pair, and then one of his brand new pair that he lost. He did finally eventually find one pair, one of the shoes, but not the other. Indeed, that is very interesting. Well, goodbye, he added as the train began to glide down the platform. Bear in mind, Sir Henry, one of the phrases in that queer old legend which Dr. Mortimer has read to us, and avoid them more in those hours of darkness when the powers of evil are exalted. I looked back at the platform when we had left it far behind and saw the tall, austere figure of Holmes standing motionless and gazing after us. So they are leaving Sherlock by himself in the city, and instead the only person we're going to follow from here on out is Dr. Watson, because he is our narrator, and because he is going to be the one there, that's all we're going to get is only things from Dr. Watson's point of view, what's happening to him. So he's kind of becoming a detective figure for a little while. The journey was a swift and pleasant one, and I spent it in making the more intimate acquaintance of my 2 companions and in playing with Dr. Mortimer's spaniel. What is Dr. Mortimer's spaniel? What is that?
The dog.
The dog, yes. The dog. In a very few hours, the brown earth had become ruddy, the brick had changed to granite, and red cows grazed in well-hedged fields, where the lush grasses and more luxuriant vegetation spoke of a richer, of a damper climate. Young Baskerville stared eagerly out of the window and cried aloud with delight as he recognized the familiar features of the Devon scenery. I've been over a good part of the world since I left it, Dr. Watson, said he, but I have never seen a place to compare with it. I never saw a Devonshire man who did not swear by his country, I remarked. It depends upon the breed of men quite as much as on the country, said Dr. Mortimer. A glance at our friend here reveals the rounded head of the Celt, which carries inside it the Celtic enthusiasm and power of attachment. Poor Sir Charles's head was of a very rare type, half Gaelic, half Ivanman in its characteristics. But you were very young when you last saw Baskerville Hall, were you not? So remember, this guy is a pure scientist, and he loves the study anatomy, the physiology of the human body. So he is very big on skulls, which is a creepy thing for him. And he even, apparently, we know from this section here about Sir Charles's head. It was a very rare type, half Gaelic, half Ivoryman in its characteristics. We see that he has actually been able to see Sir Charles's head, his skull, after he died. Kind of strange. Or it might have been just that something he noticed about his head. Since it says that our new young Baskerville is part Celtic when it comes to his head. I don't know. Either way, I think it showcases his kind of creepiness. I was a boy in my teens at the time of my father's death, and had never seen the hall, for he lived in a little cottage on the south coast. Thence I went straight to a friend in America. I tell you, it is all as new to me as it is to Dr. Watson, and I am as keen as possible to see the moor. Are you? Then your wish is easily granted, for there is your first sight of the moor, said Dr. Mortimer, pointing out of the carriage window. So now they're going to be describing the moor in detail here. So I'm going to go ahead and put that right here. This is the moor. Now remember, I told you what the moor was briefly. It's a super boggy area. It's lush and green and all that good stuff, but it's boggy, and you're going to see a lot of quicksand traps and things like that later in the story when it comes to the moor. Over the green squares of the fields, in the low curve of a wood, there rose in the distance a gray, melancholy hill, with a strange, jagged summit, dim and vague in the distance, like some fantastic landscape in a dream. Baskerville sat for a long time, his eyes fixed upon it, and I read upon his eager face how much it meant to him, this first sight of that strange spot where the men of his blood had held sway so long and left their mark deep. There he sat, with his tweed suit and his American accent, in the comer of a prosaic railway carriage. And yet, as I looked at his dark and expressive face, I felt more than ever how true a descendant he was of that long line of high-blooded, fiery, and masterful men. So, while he is looking at the moor, and he is gazing at it with wonder, because this is a place where his family has lived and held sway and power for a long time, hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of years. That's a pretty powerful idea. I don't think any of us, more than likely, have any ancestral homes where our family has had them for hundreds of years. More than likely not. So, this is it's a very particular thing with royalty in any place where their family has held sway and power for a long time. And while he is watching the moors, Dr. Watson is watching him, describing how he fits this place in many ways. Even though he has an American accent, he looks American, he is very much from this line of English royalty in many ways. There were pride, valor, and strength in his thick brows, his sensitive nostrils, and his large hazel eyes. If on that forbidding moor a difficult and dangerous question lay before us, this was at least a comrade for whom one might venture to take a risk with the certainty that he would bravely share it. The train pulled up at a small wayside station, and we all descended outside. Beyond the low white fence, a wagonette with a pair of cobs was waiting. What does a wagonette sound like? A wagon, exactly. Okay, just take off the ETE, the ETTE, and you have a wagon. Okay, that's basically what this is. A wagonette is like a small wagon. So it's uncovered. It's a tiny wagon with a pair of cobs. What is attached to a wagon? Horses, because you gotta have something to drive the wagon with. So that's going to be horses, or horse. right with my left hand way over here is really difficult. Our coming was evidently a great event, for station master and porters clustered around us to carry out our luggage. It was a sweet, simple country spot, but I was surprised to observe that by the gate there stood two soldierly men in dark uniforms, who leaned upon their short rifles and glanced keenly at us as we passed. The coachman, a hard-faced, gnarled little fellow, saluted Sir Henry Baskerville, and in a few minutes we were flying swiftly down the broad, wide road. Rolling pasture lands curved upward on either side of us, and old gabled houses peeped out from amid the thick green foliage. But behind the peaceful and sunlit countryside, there rose ever, dark against the evening sky, the long, gloomy curve of the moor, broken by the jagged and sinister hills. So each time we ever see the moor, we always have these dark type of terminologies, very sinister type of words. For instance, right here, they use the word sinister. Behind those peaceful and sunlit countryside, there rose ever, dark against the evening sky. So we already have that kind of dark language, that kind of evil feeling to this. The long, gloomy curve of the moor, broken by the jagged and sinister hills. So whenever we are getting a description of the moor, it's always unpleasant. All right? Language. When describing the moor. Also notice what kind of threw Watson for a loop as soon as they exited the train.
Two soldiers.
Thank you. You're on a roll today. Yes, two soldiers. That'd be kind of strange. What if you went to the airport and as soon as you opened the doors and started going to the front check, there were two soldiers just sitting there like this, with their rifles, over them, whatnot, just staring at you. Kind of creepy, right there. So it's something that throws Watson off, and it's something to really make sure that we are at least pointing to. I was surprised to observe that by the gate there stood two soldierly men in dark uniforms, who leaned upon their short rifles and glanced keenly at us as we passed. This throws Watson off. And very much, I think he should be thrown off by this. It's kind of a strange thing. Only one time have I been thrown off by traveling and someone stopped me. It's because apparently, if you have a suntanned complexion like mine, and you have a dark facial hair, and if you let your facial hair grow a little too long and it looks a little bit ragged, Mr. Reynolds here looks like a little bit like a terrorist, apparently. Because I could not travel through America, England, or all the way over to Kenya, Africa, without getting stopped by security every single checkpoint, because they were really worried about how I looked. So I understand a little bit getting thrown off by soldiers waiting for you. It looks kind of strange, and it throws you off for sure. The wagonette swung round into a side road, and we curved upward through deep lanes, worn by centuries of wheels, high banks on either side, heavy with dripping moss and fleshy hart's-tongue ferns. Bronzing bracken and molted bramble gleamed in the light of the sinking sun, still steadily rising as we passed over a narrow granite bridge and skirted a noisy stream, which gushed swiftly down, foaming and roaring amid the gray boulders. Both road and stream wound up through the valley, dense with scrub oak and fir. At every turn, Baskerville gave an exclamation of delight, looking eagerly about him and asking countless questions. To his eyes, all seemed beautiful, but to me, a tinge of melancholy lay upon the countryside, which bore so clearly the mark of the waning year. Yellow leaves carpeted the lanes and cluttered down upon us as we passed. The rattle of our wheels died away as we drove through drifts of rotting vegetation. Sad gifts, as it seemed to me, for nature to throw before the carriage of the returning heir of the Baskervilles. So we have two different perspectives. When you walk into school, what's your perspective on school, usually? I want to go home, right? But whenever I walk into school, do I think the same thing?
Yeah.
Yes, was the first. Yeah. Not all the time. No. Every once in a while, I do understand it. But no, I usually see school as a really great opportunity. I get kind of bored sitting at home a lot of times. So I actually like being at school. Heck, even if we were all online, I would still come to school and videotape my lectures up here like this, just because it's a different place to be. But that being said, we have two different perspectives. We have our Sir Henry Baskerville up here. We have his way of seeing things, this beautiful place. And then we have down here Watson's way of seeing things, which is kind of more melancholy, which means kind of dark and brooding. Like there's a almost an evil-like feel to the countryside to him. It's all yellow and rotting vegetation because this is autumn time here in this section. So we have two different outlooks. I want to put that over here. We have two different outlooks. Of the countryside. Two different views of the countryside here. We have Sir Henry Baskervilles, who sees this place and is as happy as gushing out questions. And we also have Watson's, who is a little bit more melancholy, as it says. To me, it's a tinge of melancholy lay upon the countryside here. And he sees all these places as kind of dark and brooding, a little bit evil-like. So right here we have an exclamation by Dr. Mortimer. "Halloa!" cried Dr. Mortimer. "What is this?" So let's see what this is that he is talking about. A steep curve of heath-clad land, an outlying spur of the moor, lay in front of us. On the summit, hard and clear like an equestrian statue, upon its pedestal was a mounted soldier, dark and stem, his rifle poised ready over his forearm. He was watching the road along which we traveled. "What is this, Perkins?" asked Dr. Mortimer. Our driver half turned in his seat. "There's a convict escaped from Princeton, sir. He's been out 3 days now, and the warders watch every road and every station. But they've had no sight of him yet. The farmers about here don't like it, sir, and that's a fact." So why do we have these soldiers here all over the place?
Because there's an escaped convict.
Yeah, there's an escaped convict, apparently. So here's right here the reason why there are soldiers. Soldiers about. The reason they had soldiers about is because there's an escaped convict. Convict escaped. Well, I understand that they get £5 if they can give information. Okay, all right. Yes, sir, but the chance of £5 is but a poor thing compared to the chance of having your throat cut. You see, it isn't like any ordinary convict. This is a man that would stick at nothing. Who is he, then? It is Selden, the Notting Hill murderer. So, we're going to actually get the name of this escaped convict right here. His name is Selden, which is kind of a strange name, but hey, that's his name, the escaped convict. His name is Selden, the Notting Hill murderer. That's a really fancy name title there. Do we usually give titles to our murderers? No. Not usually, right? Who would earn a title if you're a murderer? What would you have to do?
Kill a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have to kill a lot of people, right? Not just a few. Like, you'd have to be a mass murderer. Heck, Jack the Ripper, right? There's a famous English one. He's named the Ripper because he is famous, so he's given a name.
And you would have to do something like differently than what other killers would do. That's the reason why they get their names like that or whatever.
Exactly. Sorry? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? Which I don't know, was that actual
Yeah, that
real?
was real.
Was it real? Oh, wow, I didn't know that it was real. That's interesting. Right. So it's been given a name because it's so different and it's so violent and important. Things like that. Yes, exactly. So, this is Selden the Notting Hill murderer. I remember the case well, for it was one in which Holmes had taken an interest on account of the peculiar ferocity of the crime, and the wanton brutality which had marked all the actions of the assassin. Look at that language there, the assassin, the brutality, the wanton brutality, the peculiar ferocity. Really great language there. The commutation of his death sentence had been due to some doubts as to his complete sanity. So atrocious was his conduct. Our wagonette had topped a rise in front of us, rose the huge expanse of the moor. Oh, and in front of us rose the huge expanse of the moor, mottled with gnarled and craggy cairns and tors. Fancy word here, right here, the cairns and tors. It's basically like small little dotted hills, okay? Craggy cairns and hills and tors are going to be small hills, I believe. Should be. Small hills, yeah. A cold wind swept down from it and set us shivering. Somewhere there on that desolate plain was lurking this fiendish man, hiding in a burrow like a wild beast, his heart full of malignancy against the whole race which had cast him out. It needed but this to complete the grim suggestiveness of the barren waste, the chilling wind, and the darkling sky. Even Baskerville fell silent and pulled his overcoat more closely around him. So, knowledge that this murderer is out and loose around the moors makes them all of a sudden all get a little bit nervous. Heck, even Baskerville, who was just happy and asking questions earlier, is now pulling his coat closer around him and is a little bit worried there. We had left the fertile country behind and beneath us. We looked back on it now, the slanting rays of the low sun turning the streams to threads of gold, and glowing on the red earth, new turned by the plow and the broad tangle of the woodlands. The road in front of us grew bleaker and wilder. So they are now leaving the country. They're looking back over this hill to see this beautiful land. And there's some darkness in there with the moors in there. And they're leaving that now. And it says the road they are on is getting bleaker now. It's getting dark. So they're going from a really nice, beautiful place to all of a sudden a really dark place. Over huge russet and olive slopes sprinkled with giant boulders, now and then we passed a moorland cottage, walled and roofed with stone, with no creeper to break its harsh outline. Suddenly we looked down into a cup-like depression, patched with stunted oaks and firs, which had been twisted and bent by the fury of years of storm. Two high, narrow towers rose over the trees. The driver pointed with his whip. "Baskerville Hall," said he. So we're not really seeing a lot of great language when it comes to this hall. Instead of getting like this beautiful large building that has two high towers. No, instead we looked into a cup-like depression, patched with stunted oaks and firs, which have been twisted and bent by the fury of years of storm. Hey, there's a reason why in movies, whenever they show like a night scene, someone's running terrified through the woods, and all the trees are catching on their clothes. Why all the trees look so dark and twisted? It's because it's not normal for us. It looks creepy, and it throws you off a little bit. Its master, Sir Henry Baskerville, the new master, had risen and was staring with flushed cheeks and shining eyes. A few minutes later, we had reached the lodge gates, a maze of fantastic tracery and wrought iron, with weather-bitten pillars on either side, blotched with lichens and surmounted by the boar's head of the Baskervilles. The lodge was a ruin of black granite and bared ribs of rafters, but facing it was a new building, half constructed, the first fruit of Sir Charles's South African gold. So, we see this place. It has beautiful, like as it says here, a maze of fantastic tracery and wrought iron. Have you ever seen wrought iron gates? Notice how they're really ornate and moved around. Think about how much money it would have cost to make those 200 years ago, where they actually had to do everything by hand, essentially. That's kind of crazy. That probably showcases how much this place is really worth. But we also see that the lodge was a ruin of black granite and bared ribs of rafters. Heck, there's a lot of new houses getting built up. You can see the ribs of the houses, or the under the skin of the house connections, all those pieces of rafters and stuff. Those are the ribs of the house there, the bones of it. But apparently there is some new construction here that is a product of Sir Charles' South African gold, since he was so wealthy. Through the gateway we passed into the avenue, where the wheels were again hushed amid the leaves, and the old trees shot their branches in a somber tunnel over our heads. Baskerville shuddered as he looked up in the long, dark drive to where the house glimmered like a ghost at the farther end. Notice all that beautiful language there, that description. The house glimmered like a ghost at the farther end. Was it here? He asked in a low voice. What was here? Why would he kind of be worried around this section of the house? Well, the Hound, and what happened right here?
That's where,
Yeah, this is where Sir Charles died, right? The old owner of the house. This is where he died. He died, terrified, and his heart gave out as he was running. Remember that all that tiptoe language stuff? So he died right here. But we see, no, the U alley is on the other side. Oh, he didn't die here. He died on the other side of the house. The young heir glanced around with a gloomy face. All of a sudden, that happiness is kind of now a little bit creeped out, right? It's no wonder my uncle felt as if trouble were coming on him in such a place as this, said he. It's enough to scare any man. I'll have a row of electric lamps up here inside of 6 months, and you won't know it again with 1,000 candle power Swan and Edison. Yeah, with 1,000 candle power Swan and Edison right here in front of the hall door. So notice here that he is, let's bring this place to the 21st century. Let's bring some lights in here, because in 6 months, I'm going to make sure that there is some electricity here and that we're not going to have to be worried about how dark and gloomy it is. The avenue opened into a broad expanse of turf, and the house lay before us. In the fading light, I could see that the center was a heavy block of building from which a porch projected. The whole front was draped in ivy, with a patch clipped bare here and there, where a window or a coat of arms broke through the dark veil. From this central block rose the twin towers, ancient, crenulated, and pierced with many loopholes. Whenever you see crenellation right here, or crenulated, it's kind of a strange thing, but have you ever seen, like in movies, towers are like this? These right here, these things, are called crenellations, okay? It's where people could hide behind and go shoot down, and then hide behind them again, fire a bow, shoot, hide, things like that. It's a form of protection. So the towers have those. And pierced with many loopholes. To right and left of the turrets were more modern wings of black granite. A dull light shone through many mullioned windows, and from the high chimneys which rose from the steep, high-angled roof, there sprang a single black column of smoke. Welcome, Sir Henry. Welcome to Baskerville Hall. A tall man had stepped from the shadow of the porch to open the door of the wagonette. The figure of a woman was silhouetted against the yellow light of the hall. She came out and helped the man to hand down our bags. Silhouetted, right here, the silhouette. What does that mean? It's a shadow, right? Have you ever seen someone who is just a silhouette, just their outline? That's a silhouette. Okay, or you can also say a shadow is your own silhouette. You can see your shadows right now. So we have our two people here. You don't mind my driving straight home, Sir Henry, said Dr. Mortimer. My wife is expecting me. Surely, you will stay and have some dinner. No, I must go. I shall probably find some work awaiting me. I would stay to show you over the house, but Barrymore will be a better guide than I. Goodbye, and never hesitate at night or day to send for me, if I can be of service. The wheels died away from the drive, while Sir Henry and I turned into the hall, and the door clanged heavily behind us. It was a fine apartment in which we found ourselves. Large, lofty, and heavily raftered with huge bulks of age-blackened oak. In the great old-fashioned fireplace behind the high iron dogs, a log fire crackled and snapped. Sir Henry and I held out our hands to it, for we were numb from our long drive. Then we gazed round us at the high, thin window of old stained glass, the oak paneling, the stag's head, the coat of arms upon the walls, all dim and somber in the subdued light of the central lamp. So they walked into this house, and this house is really big. It's a mansion. It's beautiful. They have high, arching, lofty rafters. They're all made of really old, nice oak, or as it says right here, aged blackened oak, which is a beautiful look. New oak is really bright, but old oak is really dark and looks beautiful. So this place is ornate and beautiful. It's old-fashioned in many ways, but it's still a very gorgeous place. The only thing that makes it a little bit creepy is that there's it was all dim and somber in the subdued light of the central lamp. So there's only like very few lights here, so it makes all the corners kind of dark and dim. "It's just as I imagined it," said Sir Henry. Is it not the very picture of an old family home? To think that this should be the same hall in which for 500 years my people have lived. It strikes me solemn to think of it. I saw his dark face lit up with a boyish enthusiasm as he gazed about him. The light beat upon him where he stood, but long shadows trailed down the walls and hung like a black canopy above him. Barrymore had returned from taking our luggage to our rooms. He stood in front of us now with the subdued manner of a well-trained servant. He was a remarkable-looking man, tall, handsome, with a square black beard and pale, distinguished features. "Would you wish dinner to be served at once, sir?" "Is it ready?" "In a few minutes, sir. You will find hot water in your rooms. My wife and I will be happy, Sir Henry, to stay with you until you have made your fresh arrangements. But you will understand that under the new conditions, this house will require a considerable staff." "What new conditions?" "I only meant, sir, that Sir Charles led a very retired life, and we were able to look after his wants. You would naturally wish to have more company, and so you will need changes in your household." "Do you mean that your wife and you wish to leave?" "Only when it is quite convenient to you, sir." "But your family have been with us for several generations, have they not? I should be sorry to begin my life here by breaking an old family connection." I seemed to discern some signs of emotion upon the butler's white face. "I feel that also, sir, and so does my wife. But to tell the truth, sir, we were both very much attached to Sir Charles, and his death gave us a shock and made these surroundings very painful to us. I fear that we shall never again be easy in our minds at Baskerville Hall." "So, what do these servants want to do?" "They want to leave. Remember, they each were given a good amount of money. So does this look good?" No, right? It looks very much like they got the money and now they're running. So, the servants, I'm just going to put this section here. The servants want to leave. Now, they do have a decent reason, because were so attached to Sir Charles that him dying has made them very kind of not like this place as much. Let's make sure that we are not on our cell phones, since we don't need to be on our cell phones right now. Thank you very much. "But what do you intend to do?" "I have no doubt, sir, that we shall succeed in establishing ourselves in some business. Sir Charles's generosity has given us the means to do so. And now, sir, perhaps I had best show you to your rooms." A square balustraded gallery ran around the top of the whole hall, approached by a double stair. From this central point, 2 long corridors extended the whole length of the building, from which all the bedrooms opened. My own was in the same wing as Baskervilles, and almost next door to it. These rooms appeared to be much more modern than the central part of the house, and the bright paper and numerous candles did something to remove the somber impression which our arrival had left upon my mind. So that's kind of an old saying there, that the paper. What do you think they mean by the paper? Not just the money or the pictures, no. Not too many houses even have it anymore, but there used to be really popular to have wallpaper, all right, everywhere instead of just painting. There used to be a lot of wallpaper around. So the bright wallpaper is what they mean by this one. It's kind of an old thing, wallpaper. And numerous candles. So instead of just having like a somber dark green wallpaper or something like along those lines of maybe just old wood, then instead they have like probably a really bright, maybe like white paper and numerous candles everywhere. That kind of gets rid of this somber old age feel. But the dining room, which opened out of the hall, was a place of shadow and gloom. It was a long chamber with a step separating the dais where the family sat from the lower portion reserved for their dependents. At one end, a minstrel's gallery overlooked it. Black beams shot across above our heads, with a smoke-darkened ceiling beyond them, with rows of flaring torches to light it up, and the color and rude hilarity of an old-time banquet it might have softened. But now, when two black-clothed gentlemen sat in the little circle of light thrown by a shaded lamp, one's voice became hushed and one's spirit subdued. A dim light of ancestors in every variety of dress, from the Elizabethan knight to the buck of the Regency, stared down upon us, daunted us by their silent company. We talked little, and I, for one, was glad when the meal was over and we were able to retire into the modern billiard room and smoke a cigarette. So, this place where this dining hall that they have is massive. And it's sad because, have you ever been in a really big space that only had a few people? No? Yes, a few people have? It's really kind of strange. For instance, if you happen to go to church, sometimes if you stay there too late, they'll end up turning the lights off. Try walking in, if you have the time or if you have the ability to, try walking into your worship center, whatever you call that, and be by yourself. It's kind of creepy. It's a little bit weird. Being in such a large room, quiet, dark room, by yourself, it's really kind of strange. So this is how they feel here. They have this massive hall for whole banquets to eat at, but it's only two people. That's it. So it's kind of creepy for them to be by themselves. It feels strange. My word, it isn't a very cheerful place, said Sir Henry. I suppose one can tone it down to it, but I feel a bit out of the picture at present. I don't wonder that my uncle got a little jumpy if he lived all alone in such a house as this. However, if it suits you, we will retire early tonight, and perhaps things may seem more cheerful in the morning. I drew aside my curtains before I went to bed and looked out from my window. It opened upon the grassy space which lay in front of the hall door. Beyond, two copses of trees moaned and swung in a rising wind. A half-moon broke through the rifts of racing clouds. In its cold light I saw beyond the trees a broken fringe of rocks and the long, low curve of the melancholy moor. I closed the curtain, feeling that my last impression was in keeping with the rest. And yet, it was not quite the last. I found myself weary and yet wakeful, tossing restlessly from side to side, seeking for the sleep which would not come. Far away, a chiming clock struck out the quarters of the hours. But, otherwise, a deathly silence lay upon the old house. And then suddenly, in the very dead of the night, there came a sound to my ears, clear, resonant, and unmistakable. It was the sob of a woman, the muffled, strangling gasp of one who is torn by an uncontrollable sorrow. I sat up in bed and listened intently. The noise could not have been far away, and was certainly in the house. For half an hour I waited with every nerve on the alert. But there came no other sound save the chiming clock and the rustle of the ivy on the wall. So that's a creepy way to go to sleep, right? Have you ever tried to go to sleep and have something creepy you hear? It's kind of difficult to fall asleep, okay? Hey, I love the laughter of children. I love it. But if I hear a child laughing and it's 12 o'clock at midnight, I'm going to come out with my gun, okay? I'm not playing games here, okay? Same thing here. He's trying to go to sleep and he hears someone sobbing. It's a creepy way to fall asleep. In fact, not only did it just last for a few minutes, he said he sat there for half an hour, 30 full minutes, sitting there, listening to this person sob. So he was nervous this entire time. That's where chapter 6 ends. We get introduced to Baskerville Hall and it's very dark and gloomy surroundings. Not only is the hall itself sad and kind of creepy, but we also have soldiers trying to find a convicted felon, the Nottingham murderer. We also have the moors surrounding this place, so it's kind of dark and gloomy. In order to get to this place, they had to enter into this beautiful, lush scenery, and then all of a sudden they went to the creepy section of it. It's like the thing about in The Lion King, where they have this beautiful, massive amount of land, and all that Simba notices is that, hey, what's that dark region over there? We are in the dark region now of this place. All right? So, that is all of chapter 6. Hopefully it's helped you understand it a little bit, breaking down and reading it as we go along. It's now currently 9:42, so you have a little bit of time to go ahead and start working on reading through chapter 7. When you get done with the reading in chapter 7, there is some online work that you can complete. If you don't finish it at now, which I don't expect you to, you can always finish it at home. I'll leave it open even tomorrow as well to give you some extra time. All right? So, ladies and gents, go ahead and start your reading of chapter 7. If you would like to, you can choose to